All right, so this is, I'm super excited for this panel. We have some amazing investors here from some of the most legendary firms. We're going to talk through just a range of questions, product market fit, general market. There will be questions. We will take questions at the end. So we'll try to save 10, 15 minutes for questions if you have them. We'll get started. We'll bring out Kak, Deep, and Vijay. Please put your hands together. Thank you. Take a seat. Amazing. So what I thought I'd do, I'm going to introduce each person a little bit. You might not know all their details. And then we'll just start some questions. Does that sound good? Okay, amazing. So Kak, we'll start with you. You work at IVP, which is legendary in its own right. You have experience in enterprise sales at both Oracle and Cloudera. And what folks here may not know is that you're also a competitive runner in a huge way with Nike.
In a former life.
In a former life. You focus on cloud and data infrastructure, now obviously as AI as well. And you have a range of investments, Circle CI, Cribble, Cortex, MC. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Deep, General Catalyst, amazing firm. You ran your own startup in grad school. Went to Google and LinkedIn, worked in a range of product roles, leadership roles at both those organizations. You have a bunch of incredible investments, from the ARM deal at SoftBank to Adept and Modular. Amazing. You're focused very much on enterprise and AI. And for those who don't know, Deep also writes an amazing blog, deepnashar.com, which has some incredible product insights and sort of stories across his journey. So if you get a chance, check it out. Welcome.
Thank you. I've not been a spokesperson for Nike.
Okay. Okay. It's only Kak. Vijay, so you're now at Mayfield. You're running an AI startup fund. You did your own startup dropping out of your PhD. You worked at Intel Broadcom in a range of product roles. You worked at Venture and Intel Clear and Mayfield now. And your investments are things like Sambanova, DataRobot, Lilt, Landing AI, and Hypersonics. Also now, obviously, very focused on AI. So welcome, thanks for joining us. Okay, cool. So to get started, I thought we'd kick the panel off and ground the audience. Maybe give us some insight into the stage of companies that you're typically targeting and what you like to invest in or what you like to see and where your sweet spot is. We'll start with you, Kak.
Yeah, I can start. We were talking about this earlier. I mean, I think the good news is we all sort of cover different areas, so we can speak to different parts. So IVP, actually, they were just giving me credit. IVP still only does one thing. So we've been around 43 years, and we only do growth stage. So I think where other firms, AKA GC, has expanded to do sort of multi-products, so some early, middle, late, really late, even earlier, we're exclusively Series Bs and Series Cs. So what we want to see is a company that has early traction. That's generally revenue traction, though companies like Discord or Twitter were pre-revenue, but very much had a lot of adoption metrics that we could get behind. But I'd say a typical investment for us is we invest like $30 or $40 million, and you as a company, if as you guys found companies, might have 2 or 3 million in ARR. And we're trying to marry, we have to have a core belief about where the world is going, why you guys are the right team to do it. But then we do want to marry that with actual facts and what's working.
Cool. Deep?
So we are a full stack firm, just like we like full stack engineers and full stack companies. GC's genesis actually came, our 2 founders were entrepreneurs in their own right. And the first company we ever backed was Kayak, which started in our offices in Boston. So we really have a history of backing founders from the very inception stage, all the way through, we put in close to $1 billion in Stripe now since their inception, from their seed fund all the way to the most recent round they did. So what we believe is that in the new changing environment of fundraising, where a lot of capital is required, entrepreneurs love to work with firms that can come with them all the way from conception, all through their IPO stages. Amazing.
All right.
So I'm part of the Mayfield AI Fund, but Mayfield itself is 50 plus years old, $3 billion under management. We have 3 vehicles: the Start, which I'm part of, the Early, Series A's, and then a Spring, which is Series B's. So we're a full stack early stage fund. Mm-hmm. So we're a people first fund, and what that means at the start and the early stage, we tend to get very involved, even when there's just a PowerPoint stage. We don't need to have traction and revenue at that point, but we tend to be very hands-on and at very early stage.
Awesome. One question I want to do quickly as a follow-up. So there's belief, and maybe there's entrepreneurs and founders here, that there's money everywhere in AI right now. Everyone will get funded. If you know AI or you know infrastructure, you know how to scale a model, you'll get funded. Do you believe that? No? It's still traditional, company dynamics that you're looking for? How would you respond to that?
Okay, I'd say it's probably more true than it's false.
Okay.
I think this is a classic case of like, if you look at averages, especially in venture today, the output's probably not that good. So
Right.
like the average company today probably is having trouble fundraising, and the average company today probably is seeing a lower valuation than you would have seen in 2021. And, we could go on and on and on. That being said, I do think AI is having a heyday. Now, we wouldn't be sitting here if we didn't believe that were like grounded in there weren't reasons for that to be true. So I think if we are seeing this like revolution of humanity, then it's probably reasonably follows that then like that sector, which happens to be AI, is being well funded, and companies are seeing a lot of excitement. We can point to bazillions of examples where companies are getting funded sort of divorced from fundamentals, but that is because we sit before our teams and like have a deep belief for why this could be really revolutionary. So I think it's more true than not.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Steve?
I would say that, great founders and great ideas get funded no matter what the environment is. And what the current generation of AI technologies have done is they've unlocked the art of the possible, some more than it was 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And as the aperture of what is amazingly possible gets wider, then, investments will be available for them.
Yep.
So at the seed stage, we announced a $250 million AI fund, but it's still really, really hard to find good deals even now. And that's because there's so much noise.
Right.
There's a website called, there's an AI for that. There's 10,000 AI projects, right? So and if you look at GitHub and just Google LLMs or agents, there's like 20,000 projects. So if I have to spend 10 minutes a day, 8 hours straight, 5 days a week, I can barely get through the list of companies. So there's a lot of companies, but the good ones, there's the same finite amount. Mm-hmm. And I think sifting through that companies is a real art.
I think there's an AI to go through all those 10,000 projects too.
Yes, you were using AI. Yes.
I think one quick thing we could all get wrong, and this is probably more investors, but is pricing things that, sort of incumbents that are layering on AI. If we price all those or, value all those as being technology companies that are going to see AI tailwinds, but then the sort of like AI piece of it,
Yeah, exactly.
whether it's automation, reduce, like improving margins or accelerating growth, like if that doesn't come to fruition, it'll sort of be like in the 2010s, we priced a lot of things like real estate and, look at WeWork as a technology company, and then it trades in the public markets very differently. So I think that's something that we could all get wrong of like, you're going to layer on AI, but if you don't layer that on, then you're just a staffing company or a, XYZ.
Yeah, there's an interesting question sort of on where is the value capture, right? And how do you differentiate that value capture at different parts? But I wanted to move to, so you have a huge number of people here. They're all entrepreneurs, founders, all working at companies. I think one question, and you've started to touch on this, what are the most interesting applications you're actually seeing? So what are the things when you speak with lots of entrepreneurs, lots of founders, what are the things that, there's interesting applications, and then there's actual applications that are infused with AI that have product market fit. So maybe walk us through what are some of the use cases that you're seeing, what are the things that are actually working well, and then these folks here can get an idea. Who wants to start?
Start earliest.
Yeah, so there's lots of applications, right? If you think about it, like vertical applications, horizontal applications, human in the loop. There's broadly 2 categories. One is things which have been done before, and AI has been around for 10 years now, and you do this really, really well in a way that very capital efficient. So that's one kind of companies where like, oh, that's pretty cool of how you've done it before. There's others which are more surprising at those which I never knew you could do that before. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, like wedding halls, right? Like booking wedding halls using a bot to transact with a human. You couldn't do that before, right? Okay. And that's like, okay, that's a new way of looking at this industry. That industry itself is not great, but that's a great way of looking at it.
Right.
The third category, which I'm personally excited about is we call this human square or human in the loop, where there's not much software budgets for that work, right?
Right.
It's just human capital. It's billions and billions of dollars of people doing tasks without automation. And now, if you can take away part of that routine, monotonous work, you can probably create a very good business with good margins, right?
Right.
And that's a new space. So when we look at the new categories, we don't have preconceived notion of, hey, look, that particular industry was bad before. Maybe it's going to be good now. So we're keeping an open eye on how people are building companies. So across different sectors, we have different theses.
So on that, just before we jump to Deep and CAG, you take a business, I mean, there's like this traditional rule, you take a business that has a terrible NPS, Net Promoter Score, you apply AI to it, Net Promoter Score goes up. Is that therefore something you'd fund or no?
Yeah, so I'll give you one more example. Right? It's a machine translation company. It's Lilt, right? The guys at Berkeley and Stanford. So translation is a very human, laborious, thankless job.
Yep.
But companies like Intel and Dell have $10 million budgets each for translation, right? So you go in with, hey, here's a beautiful AI which can auto-translate, nobody cares about it, right? But then you go in with the workflows, you go in with, hey, here's how I can get to like SLA grade things, then you can actually create a good business around it, right? So nobody cares about translation as a margin, it's a very low margin business, but using AI, you could get to like 60-70% margins and create a software company.
Right.
You just brought back painful memories. I used to be in my product portfolio at Google, I had the machine translation team, and in the early to mid 2000s, that wasn't the best place to be. I would view this really as there are, when you consume something, there are bad calories, there are empty calories, and then there are good calories. And as an investor, you have to really learn to differentiate because they're all calories at the end of the day. The bad calories are the ones where you just slap .ai at the end and somehow try to make a regular business as a technology business. Like, you could obviously order at your local hot dog stand using a bot or just an online interface. That doesn't make it a technology company. And we just have to value it and think of it that way. It makes it slightly more efficient. That's a good thing. You can reach more customers. That's a very good thing. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be a technology company. Let's be honest. So
what you're saying, Deep, is if you have a .ai domain, you're going to fund them or you're not going to fund them?
No, it depends on who you are. If it was modular.ai, yeah, sure. Adept.ai, yes. Hotdogstand.ai, we would negotiate a bit more on the value.
Okay, great.
The good calories, if you go down that spectrum, and this is, I think, very important, and the fundamental question to ask yourself when you're starting a company is, would this company exist but for this technology? So Uber, which is now a $120 billion company and counting, right? It wouldn't exist without the mobile device. And so it is truly a mobile company. WeWork, CAC's example, would exist with or without mobile or with or without a computer. People are doing like work sharing for a really long time. And then, it's difficult to justify it being like an AI plus company.
Yep.
So AI plus company is one that wouldn't exist without that particular, the AI technology. Plus AI company, slap it on, make it more efficient, but then don't expect it to have that exponential growth or that exponential impact and outcome.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, back to the spirit of the question, which is, what are we excited about? What do we want to see?
Yeah.
I mean, I think as a VC, I can sit before you and say, if I had a really good idea, then I'd be sitting where you are, and then I'd be pitching it to us. I find it's really hard as an investor to be the one that's conjuring what the cool new thing is, or even conceptualizing what the future could be. But I also know, when you guys come and pitch to us or present or sit and have a coffee, then you're like, oh, wow, amazing. I think with AI, I am most tuned into sort of the incremental, what are the new, even tiny things, as we go to multimodal and as you can interact more with images and video versus just text and language, then just being very clued into what does that unlock? What, if you combine that piece with A and B and C, what can you do then? Because I think just trying to conjure 5 years from now we're going to be able to do all these things is really, really hard.
Right. Yeah. I think it's interesting. So there was a McKinsey report, I don't know who's seen it, and they sort of go through you look at a balance sheet and you look across a traditional organization's balance sheet. You have sales and marketing, obviously it's a massive component. There's generative AI, You can see all the Mojo stuff that we put up today. That's all, using the infrastructure that we built, generate a bunch of models, a bunch of outputs. That has radically transformed how we do marketing, for example, right? So it's a very clear use case that you have a lot of organizations now around the world that are beginning to say, well, wait, we used to employ all these segments to come and do this stuff, but now we can just punch it into an LLM or an image model, and away we go. Like, how do you see across, and there's so many different verticals, you can do it across coding, Michele talked about code generation. Are there certain sort of this productivity segment that you see? Is that where you're seeing, really interesting applications of AI applied, or no? Is it other areas? Anyone?
So I think the same McKinsey report, right? The low-hanging fruits are coding,
Right.
Customer support,
Because these
sales
are
and marketing.
extreme value sections inside businesses, right?
Right.
Like where they're really high cost functions and you're radically changing outputs.
Yeah. So I think there's two aspects to this, right? One is what is back office and within an enterprise,
Yep.
and how much value it can add, right? So if you look at that scale, I think coding is pretty high, and then
Right.
customer support and so on and so forth. I think AI is at a point where you can't really bring them out in the front office at this point, right? They need a human in the loop.
Yep.
There's a lot of hallucinations. So I think in the next few years, we're going to see like some of these back office productivity gains coming to the front office, and that's probably more exciting just from the back office itself. But yeah, we're going through the curve of
Right.
highest
Hype cycle?
Yeah, no, I think more from a productivity cycle, right? Is like highest benefit, least resistance, and then we'll come down to like
Yep.
more resistance, and with regulations coming in, we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, but even as you think about starting companies, the one thing you have to really distinguish, be very self-aware of. It's one thing what you pitch to investors, but I've been in your shoes. I started a company 25 years ago. I had the opportunity to really build, very large-scale businesses, both at Google in the early days and then LinkedIn. Be very self-aware. What are you building? Is it really a feature, a product, or a company? You can give an enterprise, your customer, a lot of value, like, the marketing example that you
Yep.
gave, amazing value to the enterprise. I don't think that there is long-term value to the company that's building that value, because at the end of the day, what is the core IP that you build?
Right.
If you're just building on somebody else's LLM and you're putting a wrapper, it's a race to the bottom. There are 200 other companies that we see every day. 10,000 projects, and there's an AI for that. I've personally looked at 1,000 companies this year, and that's because, we have a phenomenal team that like culls that 10,000 to 1,000.
Yep.
You're not invested in 1,000 companies, right? We invested in like 13 this year, and of which, like 2 that stood out in terms of large allocations of dollars were Modular and Adept. Like everyone else got a seat check. So we are thinking at longevity of companies too, and what is the enduring ability of what IP you're truly building to it. And that's an important thing. Just because a problem is worth solving doesn't make it a company.
Yep. Okay.
I think my hesitation was, your question, productivity relating to companies and sort of like
Sure.
value.
Yeah.
I think the obvious value is to all of us as consumers. Like, absolutely, productivity suite. Whether it's Notion or,
Right.
spreadsheets or word processing, or like, we are all going to benefit greatly as consumers, right? There are already a million things you can do in Notion that you couldn't before. And like, do we have to pay any more? Maybe not. But I think the tricky part is like, yes, does the company accrue value? Do the VCs accrue value? Do the incumbents accrue value? I think, and this whole accrue value, I think is such like venture speak, so I apologize that even uttering it. But I think that is, like, therein lies the hard part. I think we have examples of companies that are like truly full stack. They've built their own LLMs. They've done really well. And I think we can, get behind them because we think that they're more defensible. We have other companies built on top of OpenAI, and that's like a very tenuous place to be. We have others that are probably reduced to wrappers, but are really close to the consumer, and we think they could do phenomenally well, even though all of the zeitgeist is like being a wrapper is terrible. But I think in any of these cases, even look at Adobe, look at Notion, like, you have great examples of the consumer benefit from these is tremendous.
Yep. I mean, I think there's an interesting question there. If you're starting a business, you're trying to prove product market fit on an API. You're just trying to penetrate, find out if there's users. And then the pitch is, hey, we're an amazing team. We can build this infrastructure ourselves over time. The IP accrues to us. We can build our own model and then roll it out. But look at the acquisition we've got from our users. I mean, is that Is that a pitch you hear? Is that something that you accept? Because feels like when I talk to a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, I hear that all the time now, right? Like, well, I prototyped this using the OpenAI GPT-4. Look at our traction's been amazing. Trust us, we can go and build the infrastructure now because we know AI. Is that enough? Do you think that's enough? It sounds like you're saying maybe not.
No, it's not enough.
I think, go ahead.
No.
Okay.
At the seed stage, we have to take a leap of faith at some point, right? I think, so I'll give an example, right? So we've seen a lot of pitches coming into legal tech.
Yeah.
And hey, I'm using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I can go and scrape the web, right? And maybe go after customer support or things, right? I think where we have a hard time is, one, there's no founder domain fit in a startup.
Right.
You don't know anything about legal tech. You guys have you're RAG people, right? You build really good RAGs and you know how to do it.
Yep.
But you don't know about legal tech. So that's one place where we're like, hey, look, where is the founder market fit?
So they have the infrastructure expertise, but they don't have the domain-specific expertise.
So the killer teams are one which have both.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And second is, where is the propriety coming
Right.
from, right? Is it coming from the models? We're using ChatGPT like everybody else could use, right?
Yep.
So let's leave around that, can you build it, right? We'll come back to that. Second is, you don't have data moats. You don't have customer moats,
Yep.
right? So within a week, I'm going to hear one more pitch exactly similar. And it's
Right.
happened so many times, right? The YC batch of last year, there's we keep hearing the 3 or 4 pitches. So then we step back and say, look, why you versus why anyone else? But then when you come, let's say you build a business at Series B or Series A, you have metrics to prove it, so you don't
Right.
need to explain that. But at the seed stage, really know what your secret sauce is. And second is, if infrastructure is a core competence and you want to build using wrappers, that's fine. But we need to believe, and you need to convince us that as you build this infrastructure, you have some competitive advantage. And going back to the legal tech, if you use ChatGPT, you can't do a lot of documents. It's just limited by the context window of whatever is available, right? But if you can build your own infrastructure and it can read through like thousands of documents, you have a better tech than anyone else has.
Yep.
So that's how you need to convince us. But doing like everybody else does is bad.
Right.
Worse than that is doing something which a large incumbent is a feature in a large setting, like whether it's Slack or Zoom or OpenAI. If you're doing something which is just adjacent, that's a red flag.
Yeah. Like there's video to speech transcription, but then Zoom rolls out speech transcription directly inside their product, same as Google Meet, and then instantly you just destroy probably thousands of startups overnight. Do either of you have comments?
No, I think, you cover it, right? Which is like, what is your right to win? Like,
Right.
you really think hard about it. But look, we sit on this side. We know that we are in a position where a founder has to market to the investor in order to sell their wares, if you will, right? And vice versa. And it's okay to take leaps of faith in your presentations. But in the quiet moment when you are by yourself, be like extremely hyper vigilant and true to yourself and say, what is my right to win here? And why am what I'm building going to be winning versus somebody else? That's one thing. The second is, how are you going to, even if you have a right to win today, how are you going to compound on it over time? What are you going to build? So think of it always in longer durations. 95% of all technology companies that are publicly listed, so they've gone through all the gauntlets of being, surviving the first 2-year mark, surviving, getting to the 50, 100, 200 in revenue, then surviving being public. 95% of them all don't survive more than 17 years from inception, not from when they went public. Okay? These are companies that have created new markets. This includes companies like Netscape, PeopleSoft, Sun Microsystems, LinkedIn, not, public and independent. It's thriving under Microsoft's aegis, but it's not independent. So the bar of compounding whatever your right to win is over a sustained period of time is very, very high.
Yep.
So think of it from the get-go.
Yep.
And when you have those answers, then you know that you have something really amazing in front of you, and then go all in.
Yeah, so tying that to sort of your original
Yeah.
question of, is being an API enough
Right.
to start? I do think if you overlaid those select, 5% companies, I think one thing that would be true with all of them is just like shipping velocity of product.
Right.
And I think that's extra true in AI right now. I think so much of it is just like, excuse me, if a new model comes out, today, I was going to say yesterday, but it's not even yesterday to today. It's like this morning to this afternoon. Like, have you incorporated it in your product? Have you, you know, made the world aware of it? Have you, you know, has everyone already started using Max already, like today, this morning? So I think that is a really, maybe it's appropriately estimated. I was going to say underestimated, overestimated, but I think that is a key component. And I think the other thing that people might be getting wrong, where API alone isn't quite adequate, is just like, you have to be really close to the user. I think even if you look at all the OpenAI brouhaha, like so much of that was emphasis on models and like OpenAI models versus someone else's models versus someone else's models, and who was going to win and lose. But there wasn't that much discussion about like which products, because people consume products. People don't really consume models. You guys consume models, but like I don't consume models. I consume products. And that emphasis on the end user and the product, I think it's still early days, but I think we need to get a little closer to that versus just talking about like models and APIs, because you can ship the API, but then you have to keep shipping a bunch of stuff and you have to like get to the user.
Yeah. Okay. Changing tune a little bit, I think there's a lot of folks here that will be interested in this. So you see many business model approaches, right? You have open source, closed source, mixture of them. What are the monetization approaches that you're seeing as it pertains? I mean, obviously we can focus on enterprise or we can go to consumer, but given the audience is probably more developer focused, stick to enterprise. Like, what are the things that you're seeing evolve? Is it all compute? Is it all on-demand pricing? Like, what are the sort of replicable models that you're seeing apply across the companies that come and pitch to you?
I mean, I guess we're latest stage, or yeah,
You're latest stage, so you have way more.
I mean, we see, yeah. So on the API question, like we just wait until see if you have revenue, and then we'll which is like a cop out compared to what you guys have to do. I mean, within application layer, we see a ton of prosumer still. I mean, we're investors in Grammarly, we're investors in Jasper, we're investors in DeepL, for example. That's like a fully verticalized. They run their own models. That's. I actually think in AI, it's not going to be dramatically different business models. Like there are only so many ways that you can sell, charge, have an enterprise sales team versus product led. So we're seeing, and then, there's a lot more going on in consumer too. Right. There are companies like Perplexity that is a prosumer model, free, anyone can upgrade to paid. That is masquerading as an infrastructure company, but they have done what one thing they have done really well is like understanding that they have to be, right, if you're trying to build a search index, they can't do that in a vacuum. Right. They, by necessity, needed to have users, and I think that has allowed them to refine and build their infrastructure. Yep. But the business models themselves, I don't know that they're going to be like that radically different.
Yep.
Yeah, they really aren't. And the more you hear the phrase "this time is different," the more you know that it is the same. Okay, the laws of business are immutable. You provide a lot of value, and you get some value back. You accrue some value. You give someone $10 of value, you try to get $1 or $2 of value away from that interaction, and that's just how it works. And how you choose to get it, whether you do it on utilization models, you do it on subscription models, you do it on open source, but then you give a bunch of like tools on top of it. It's a continuum. Use a model that fits well to your business customers' needs. Like that is super critical, right? Don't think of it as this is how I charge. This is how value accrues to the person and the organization that I sell it to, and then what are they willing to pay me for that? That's really the test of how successful your enterprise is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Vijay?
So I think start with the customer, right? And I'll give you a couple of examples. So you don't want to innovate on pricing if your customer is not willing to do it, right? So if you go to someone who wants to buy consumption-based model and you say, here's a new way of, I'm going to sell you a model and I'm going to charge you for models, you're not going to sell. So I think your job is to innovate on technology, not on business model innovation, right? I think that's one. Second is, I think it has to be a complete company-wide philosophy of how you go and price your product, right? So if your goal is to get enterprise data, you don't want to create any friction to go into enterprise with a $1 million or $500K ARR deal. You might want to get in, get quickly, the least friction you can, and get the enterprise data so you can build a better product.
Right.
So how you compensate your sales teams, how you compensate it has to be tied in with this whole loop of what's your core moat? Is it getting the data? How do you charge for it? I think I would say like be very, very flexible and don't go against enterprise the way they consume.
Okay, so an interesting question too, geographically. So post-COVID, we've seen companies go everywhere. There's a narrative now that, that I've heard a lot. AI is in Silicon Valley. That is, everyone's come back. AI, that it all starts, it scales in Silicon Valley. Is that what you're seeing? Is that true? Are we saying no, that there's, obviously there's AI everywhere around the world, different regulatory maps, all those things. But for you, funding, meeting entrepreneurs, how are you thinking about it? Is it just here, got to be local? Is it, no, we fund companies all over the place?
I think we're a little bit more opinionated. So it has to be geographically close, like the West Coast is where most of our deals are done.
Right.
And I think historically speaking, right, the last 10 years, the pockets of AI were in deep learning, right? We're in Canada.
Right.
You saw a lot in Europe, and then in the US, and then China as well. Like there's like different pockets. But for LLMs, it's all somehow converging towards the Bay Area.
Right.
I think it's surprising to see how others haven't kept up with the innovation, but we're seeing a lot of focus towards this from a pure AI standpoint. But business in LLMs, you can build anywhere in the US, right? But we tend to be seeing more infra, core, cutting edge.
So you're saying all the people that started crypto over in Miami, they're all coming back?
Yes.
Okay.
They can stay there.
I don't think they started crypto.
No, they didn't start.
They started it here.
They started a movement, maybe is what I should have said.
So I think all the crypto VC WhatsApp groups are being renamed to be like AI.
Yeah, they've all turned?
All the
I see.
VCs
Got
and
it.
founders, everybody's.
Wait, how many people here in the audience used to do crypto 3 years ago and now are doing AI? Just one?
Only one person willing to admit.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, a round of applause for being honest.
Yeah, we have a different viewpoint, really. Look, 25 years ago when I started my company, I was in grad school in Boston, and my VCs made me move here because they're like, if we can't drive to your office, like we're not funding you. And I think that was okay at that point in time.
Yeah.
Today, you have to be where the entrepreneurs are. And, who's to say that the best entrepreneur as we speak is not starting a company in Shanghai, Seoul, Bangalore, Kiev,
Right.
wherever. Like pick your favorite destination around the world. I mean, Modular is very distributed. That didn't stop us from investing in you because we think you're building something pretty awesome.
Right.
And it's more onus on the companies to manage it. But, that's sort of your problem, right, as the founder.
Yep.
Well, maybe I'll somehow agree with both of you because I think everything is in San Francisco. Like, yes, we are happy to go wherever the entrepreneurs are. I was in London last week for a week and actually had a hard time finding infrastructure plus AI related companies, period. I had very few company meetings. So we're happy to go wherever companies are and where founders are, but I just think everyone's in San Francisco. I think all of the companies building this kind of thing, the people are right here, you guys are right here. And some of you probably flew in, but most of you probably live here. And it's not a coincidence.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to go to audience questions in a second, but before we get there, I want to ask one long vision question that I don't think, well, we might be recorded, so this might go forever being cased. But what's your take on the next 12 months for AI, then go out to say 5 years and then 10 years? What are you predicting is going to happen across those time spans? It's a small question to answer, but prepare yourself.
Okay, I'll offer a few opinions. I think OpenAI will obviously release 4.5 and 5, and those will be groundbreaking. That being said, I think open source sort of is the engine of innovation, and I think open source will quickly follow, will help us all inform how we understand these models. I think both of those are very positive. And this is my take. I have no idea,
Right.
Caveat, I have no idea. These are just, but, and I do think responding to these releases will be really, really important.
Yep.
I also think NVIDIA will have to produce faster, cheaper, better chips. Now, everyone will have to, but I think the hyperscalers, because they're going to launch their own chips, or they, fancy that they aspire to, I think will, and I think that will just lead, with faster chips, better models, better experiences. Like, I think those are inevitable.
Right.
And I think we also are going to see a fair amount of carnage in VC invested AI startups,
Right.
sort of back to the prior point of just like true AI companies versus plus AI
Right.
companies and
Yep.
which of them fall out. And I think, because we've seen so much experimentation, but as we move from experimentation to production and like real paved roads and everyone doing the same thing consistently, I think that remains to be seen.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, I would probably answer the question along two vectors. One is the science and technology vector, and the other is the commercial vector,
Right.
because I think both matter. And in terms of the science and technology vector, in the next 3 to 4 years, we are going to get something other than LLMs
Right.
become interesting. Like if you think about transformers, right? I think they were first talked about at NeurIPS in 2017, and didn't make a wave at all. Like nobody cared at some level.
Yep.
Here we are 6 years later. So I can tell you after I go to NeurIPS next week, what's going to be the thing in 5 years, hopefully, right? That we will invest in and that we will all talk about. And the reason for that is very simple. Like every researcher worth their salt today, they're not going to make their name in the universe by just working on the next incremental improvement to transformers, right? They want to think of the next big thing that's going to like completely leapfrog this, which is amazing for all of us as humanity. But that's what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Is like, this is, I don't think it's the end. This is the end of the beginning, if you will, of where the technology curve is going. So you want to pay attention to that too, because if you're going to hitch your bandwagon and your company to today's models, at least are you having a flexible infrastructure underneath so you can go on to the next thing. On the commercial side, we are extremely early. So if you look at the transcripts of like S&P 500 companies in the past year, what you find is at least 80% of them in their analyst calls talked about generative AI in some way, shape, or form. So you're like, yay, high five all around. Like, we have customers. It turns out that if you look at their 10Qs, which are the filings where they have to talk about important, meaningful investments, only 10% of them actually spend that kind of money and their budgets on like transformative AI stuff. Everyone has experimental budgets, right? Just because you get a $100,000 deal from like Walmart, I mean, Walmart may be a bad example because they're like super frugal with their money, but pick another company that has like $300 billion of revenue and like 10% EBITDA margins. $100,000 they'll try on things that everyone's talking about and their board is talking about, right? But when they start putting $10 million, $20 million, more importantly, when their critical business workflows and customer workflows start depending on your technology, that's when you know that you've hit that inflection point. And we are still very, very early on the commercial side.
Yep.
So, this cycle of AI is, I think, great for science and technology, somewhat good for revenue generation in the mainstream, but that we are going to see grow over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yep. Vijay?
I think using the same vectors on the commercial side, we're in the crawl stage at this point, right, from enterprise adoption. So we need to walk in the next couple of years and then run. That usually takes like 5 to 7 years to go into production. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where you'll see a lot of the economic impact, right? In the meantime, we will go through our standard hype and bust cycle once in Gen AI. I think this is not sustainable, both from a venture funding standpoint and from the lack of use cases. So lack of commercial use cases, right? So we'll go through that phase. On the technology side, I'm very bullish on agents.
Right.
On the long term, I think it's very early days right now. So
Agents, can you define that? Do you mean
I
like
can't.
reinforcement learning-based data?
So everybody has a different definition of agents, but it's like, hey, setting a task, being self-aware of what it is, setting the goals, and then coming back and redoing it. I think we're starting to see like really good toy examples of this, and it'll take a while before they become mature.
Right. Okay.
But that's a very interesting area, whether you use RL or Q star, A star. The other is different modalities like text to video. We're still at 4 or 5 seconds.
Yep.
I'm very curious to see how it goes in like 10, 20 seconds when you start doing enterprise adoption. Different modalities like time series. So there's a lot of like innovation on the technology stack. And then back to Deep's point, it's very, very compute inefficient right now. So how do we improve that? Maybe using common sense or different kind of techniques to make it much better. So
Just using Max. That's easy. Sorry, I had to do a plug.
I think one cultural comment is I do think, like, if you had talked to any of us in late 2021, 2022, like, there was an element of falling out of love with our job, like having to decide on investing in a company in 48 hours with minimal information, having spent like max, 3 hours with the CEO, just sort of took the fun out of it. We're in this job because you're intellectually curious and you just want to like learn stuff and, ramp up on the topic really quickly. And it kind of, 2021 and 2022, it was no fun. And seeing even just like ChatGPT for the purpose of having us all in this room together and us all really jazzed and excited and like you guys flying to NeurIPS and New Orleans next week. And it's great for a city and an ecosystem and just like a, body of people. So I'm grateful for that, for sure.
Awesome. If anyone has questions, you can go up to microphones. We can take some questions. Otherwise, I can. We have someone over here. I'd love to ask a question. Hey, can you just say your name and then read your question? That'd be great. Thanks.
Sure. My name is Devinder, and the question is this. I have a bit of a scenario where investors are actually my leadership in my org, and I'm in the process of proposing better software processes and infrastructure through AI. I've figured out some use cases, a bit about security, all those things about determinism, lack thereof. The challenge is this the right time because the innovations keep coming, right? So how do candidates convince you that it's the right time to invest in a particular solution?
So you're the CEO and you're trying to like get people on board that you want to invest in AI.
I'm just an employee. So it's a bit of a flip on the VC side, but the question is the same. How do people convince you this is the right time for this particular solution?
So it's back to, maybe to phrase your question, it's back to product market fit. How do we find it? Is it product market fit and team, which it sounds like you folks have all said yes.
Yeah. Look, in the earlier stages, you're really peering into the eyes of the founder and trying to figure out, for 6-month-old, effectively, and trying to figure out if they're going to become the next Katie Ledecky.
Right.
Okay, it's a crapshoot. Even her parents didn't know she was going to become the next, most decorated Olympian. So you're trying to figure out the breadcrumbs of that founder or the founding team's history to say, do you have what it takes to go build something? Sure. The initial idea is interesting and important, meaning it shouldn't just be like, the app Yo, which, again, I'm harkening back to the early days of mobile apps. There was literally an app which was a top 10 app on the iPhone App Store, and you could just say Yo to each other, and it did just well.
I had a flashlight app too.
The flashlight app is actually useful. The Yo part, I don't know, because, the zeitgeist changes over time, right? Yeah. It becomes WhatsApp afterwards. So it's important what that initial idea is, but it's not like the be-all and end-all. Most interesting companies, many interesting companies, I should say, not most, have some pivot in their lifespan, right? The big pivots we all know about, like Slack started as a gaming company, became what it was. I led the largest investment round in Slack. Later on, have known Stuart for a while. That's like a big example. But there are many successful companies that started somewhere and then had to constantly move. So what you're also looking for is like that flexibility. And again, the breadcrumbs in the founding team's history to say, have they been that flexible? And can they roll with the punches? And just take the daily high highs and low lows of being a founding team. I don't think anyone here, who does early stage investing, sits there and says, oh, do you have your 5-year plan locked in? Because you can, but it'll be false precision. It's never going to work out the way you think it is going to work out.
Fair enough. Thank you.
No, but my flippant answer is you should probably go work for Modular or work for another company where, do you want to wake up every day and your friction is does my team see the light that AI is a thing and we should scrum on it even for an hour or a day? Part of me thinks your CEO must be living under a rock if you haven't, I'd say most of our companies have at least, existing companies that weren't AI companies have at least stood up a team of 3 or 4 who's evaluating, experimenting with what you might be able to do. So if you're meeting friction for that, that just seems a little out of non-standard for 2023 at this point.
Well, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks. We'll take one from here.
Yeah. Hi. So right after the sort of nuclear bomb of ChatGPT from last year, people started talking about the fact that the general consensus seemed to be that infrastructure was the area that was the most defensible in the rapidly emerging space. I feel like that's been played out even more. You guys were talking about it earlier. That's maybe become more and more true even in the last year. I'm curious, what are the areas that maybe in AI infrastructure that are maybe not on everyone's lips today that you guys are thinking about, sort of the next wave, or some of the kind of companies you might be hearing about, or, directionally, like how do we support, for example, the distribution of scaled inference, that sort of thing? Like whatever's hot in that space, I'm curious your thoughts about that.
I think maybe a couple of different layers, right? So on the bottom layer, on the silicon layer, the compute is what, 3x every 2 years flops, right? And then memory and interconnect is like less than half of that. And then you look at the model size is like 400, 500x every 2 years. And costs are like 700 to 800x every 2 years, right? And so now we start to see a lot of places where it's breaking. It's not just compute anymore, it's memory bandwidth. And that's on the bottom layer, right? And then you go on top of it, I think that's where like companies like Modular play in, is like, it's going to be very heterogeneous infrastructure at some point. How do you go build a layer on top of it? And the layer on top of it is like, it's pretty much a house of cards at this point. It's like, you can't build anything without a lot of glue code on the data and ops side. So that's very, very exciting. So we're investing heavily in security, data ops, and that layer, which, again, it's all picks and shovels, not very sexy, but that's where we'll start seeing a lot of different things. And you saw, how do you get data from unstructured data into into your LLMs or vectorizing? That's exciting. But again, the key here for us, at least as investors, is where do you invest and where do you stay back, because the clouds are doing it and it's in their path. We don't want to be roadkill. So I think just figuring out where is the bottlenecks and where the clouds play, where we invest. I think that's a pretty interesting space.
Yeah, I think I would think about it again along two vectors. One is durability, which gives you defensibility. So if the underlying models on which you're building the infrastructure or making the infrastructure to make those models very useful, are they going to be durable and stand the test of time? If they're not, then all the infrastructure you build is not going to avail too much, right? So if you're building a lot of like Betamax related stuff and Betamax kind of failed, you have a problem. Now, you can't peer into the future. So then what do you do if you really want to build infrastructure? Is try to be flexible, or you try to wait for a bit and see which way things are going, or has enough of an ecosystem built around it. So that's one vector. The second vector is how much real need for infrastructure is there in today's paradigms. And a lot of the old stuff is actually going away. So if today I can just take an API layer and build applications directly on top, then a whole host of things that were, historically what you needed don't need to exist anymore. And so don't force fit it either. And then maybe I'll add a third vector, which is have a point of view on where the macro is going. If you believe that eventually the model and the compute is going to reside with a hyperscaler, then just in the same way that the hyperscalers have continued to become bigger and bigger in terms of additional infrastructure that they're putting in, which makes it very competitive, not an untenable, but a competitive environment, will the same thing happen here? Because eventually, right now, what are most companies doing, right? 80 cents on every dollar is going into some sort of compute, whether it's going to a hyperscaler or it's going directly into building up your own data center. So that is going to be where a lot of capital is going to go.
Did you want to go? Wait.
No, I'm good.
We might take one more and then we're done, unfortunately. So we'll go this side because I'm conscious of lunch and there's a lot of stuff that we're on a pretty tight schedule. Sorry, you just say your name and then the question and then that's it.
Absolutely. Eddie Storm, existential question I think the panel will appreciate. Existential for VCs and maybe everybody trying to build companies. Do you feel like we overestimate our abilities to build moats in the environment now where the AI is democratizing and giving everybody the ability to bridge the creative gap that would traditionally constitute something that you would consider part of a moat? So are you like re-examining your older investment? You're like, I don't know about this. Like somebody might pounce on them because those patents, they maybe don't mean so much if you have computational chemistry and other things. Somebody can come in with a patentable alternative and like, you're done. So I know kind of a maybe big question for the little time we have left, but agree, disagree, thoughts?
Kat?
I mean, I'd probably hold two things to be true at the same time, which is like, yes, you raise a really good question. And I think there are companies, look, we did it probably like Q1 this year where we had the existential moment of like, which of our companies are just going to be obliterated overnight. And, you know, it used to be like Amazon reInvent would announce things at, you know, their conference and you'd say like, oh, these swath of companies is going to go out of business. Same with OpenAI now, you know, Dev Day, it's like these swath of companies going to go out of business, or they're just going to be commoditized. So yes, I think like part one is, yes, that's true. We had that moment. It was a more dramatic moment than it was with like any other technology innovation of the past like 2 decades. At the same time though, lots of these companies have really durable revenue. Like we're in San Francisco where everyone's talking about ChatGPT and like the rest of the world could give a shit. And I think we forget that like when we read the front page of the FT or the Wall Street Journal, like we're all living it, right? Like if we all needed to talk to Sam Altman like tomorrow, we probably could, but the rest of the world, that's not true. So I think there are so many industries where just physically like moving data from point A to point B, or you work in audit in a big 4, you know, audit firm, like it's just not going to happen overnight. So I think both are true.
Yeah, I think you look at it from both a tech vector and a commercial vector. The tech vectors move a lot faster than the commercial vectors. So take an example of a company like Canva, right? The tech vectors would suggest that you don't need them because you should just be prompting and then immediately like all kinds of amazing things would happen. Turns out Canva is doing $2 billion this year and is still growing at 50+% rate,
Right.
and also has generative AI, right? So the trick, if you have a company that's working and has a flywheel, is to ask yourself, if I were to build this company today, how would I use today's technologies? And see how quickly you can flexibly inject those technologies in your commercial vector. Don't underestimate the power of the slowness of your customers to adopt new technology.
Useful friction.
Yeah, I think last thing I'll say is like, be very flexible, especially at the seed stage. This is true for startups and for VCs, is not to be too opinionated. Things change along the way, whether it's technology or how enterprises consume. So having a North Star, but also being very flexible is probably the way to survive this very changing dynamic space.
What a
Amazing.
time to be alive.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. Okay, everyone, put your hands together. That was amazing. Thank you for our panelists. Jack, Steve,
Thank you.
DJ.